So most people know about Scottish basket hilts, but not that many know about German basket hilts. Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. So I'm here today at Olympia Auctions, looking at some of their amazing lots that are in the upcoming sale on the 4th of December 2024. Now, as mentioned, most people I think are familiar with Scottish basket hilts. In fact, some of the earliest basket hilts we have from the British Isles are actually English, not Scottish, but that's sort of a topic for another video. But the Mary Rose, for example, has one of the most famous examples of an early, around 1540, example of a basket hilt. And we have other examples in places like the Royal Armouries, which we've looked at previously, from the 1530s, 1540s. So basket hilts, I think, which a lot of people think of as a later thing, a 16th, 17th century thing, actually start to appear already in the really quite early 16th century, which is amazing when you think about it, when we look at swords from the late 15th century, which are predominantly just simple, straight cross guards most of the time. But we get a really rapid development of complex hilt types once we get into the 1500s. So, what we're looking at here are some examples which are in the upcoming auction, and I thought what a great opportunity to show you some of these, of some basket hilts found on German, should we say, they can sometimes be Austrian, but German, various parts of Germany. Clearly it wasn't a unified country at that point, but German, we'll call them German for the purposes of this video, basket hilts. Now, the first thing I have to mention is these are to be found on a variety of different blades. Sometimes they're double-edged broadsword blades, if you want to call them that. Sometimes they are single-edged backsword blades. Funnily enough, this example that I'm holding here is a bit of both, in that it's single-edged halfway up and then double-edged above that. So it's kind of a, what do you call it? I don't know. A broadsword, backsword hybrid. But the characteristic features of these buckets, oh, and also you find them on saber blades as well, but we'll get on some examples of those in a minute, actually more correctly referred to as a dussac or tessac, but we'll come to that in a second. But the characteristic features of these, and it's not universal, they're not all exactly the same, but these are very common features, are a basket made of usually cylindrical bars around here. It can be symmetrical, but very often it protects the right hand side more than the left hand side, but as I say, can be symmetrical. That's the first feature. The second feature are quillons, so they still have quillons projecting. So later in history, when people start to trust in basket hilts a bit more, they pretty much abandon quillons. But whether you're looking at Britain or Germany or Venice, the early ones still have a crossguard. But on these German ones, not always, sometimes they're straight, but very, very often they curl up at the back and down at the front. Notice they are not normally, although again they can be, but they're not normally S-curved. They are normally straight in this plane, so straight up, straight down if we're looking in this way. But when we're looking this way, they go up at the back, down at the front, okay? And then very often, again, not always, but very often we have a large plate, a bit like a dish hilt or a cup hilt almost, at the top up here. So that provides a huge amount of protection to thrusts coming down this way, or just generally protection to your hand from anything else, cuts or anything else. And finally, a very common feature, again not universal but very, very common, is a pommel which is relatively flat. Okay, so rather than being flat in this direction, like a Schiavona pommel, rectangular or cat's head shaped, or rather than a wheel pommel, or rather than a kind of globose ball pommel, they are often sort of, I would describe it as toadstool or mushroom-like. So you'll see that they come up, they sprout out, they are circular from that direction, but they are quite squat and flat. Now sometimes these are actually square or rectangular from this direction, but they are quite flat and squished from that direction. And they have quite snug, small hilts. That's important with basket hilts because if you make a hilt longer or bigger than it needs to be, that greatly increases the weight of the hilt. So the best way to make a basket hilt as light as possible is to make it as small as possible. So that means a short grip and a confined basket that is close to your hand. Now, the German examples often also feature one last feature which is found on nearly all of them, and that is a thumb ring built in here inside the basket. So they are designed to be held not with a finger over anything, but with a thumb over the thumb ring on the inside there. Okay, so it's a huge amount of hand protection. It's a really good trade-off between weight and hand protection, actually. You've got big, long quillons, which especially in an age where a lot of people are using rapiers is really useful, because if you're fighting someone with a rapier who's predominantly thrusting at you, if you've got these long quillons, it enables you to encounter their blade at the same time as giving your own attack back. But against cuts, you've got the basket, huge amount of protection, and against both cuts and thrusts, you've got this sort of plate at the top. Now, related to this are the hilts that we often find on dusaks or tessaks. In that case, we've still got quillons which go up and down, we've still got a thumb ring, but they are usually asymmetrical. And that is, they have usually a large plate on the outside protecting the back of the hand, and they usually have a knuckle bow on the front, and they don't usually have anything, or very commonly don't have anything on the inside. This means they are actually easier to wear. Now, funnily enough, this type of sword, in many ways, I think people think of this as the archetypal pirate sword, but in fact, most of these are earlier date than the golden age of piracy. Most of these are from the 1500s. But they were still around in the 1600s, so really at the beginning of the golden age of piracy, let's say 1620s, 1630s, these were around still. And certain forms of these sometimes get described as Sinclair hilts for various reasons. But anyway, so this isn't the same as this type of basket hilt, but they are from a similar background and tradition. And you'll notice, again, flat pommel. This one's square that way, but quite flat this way. They've both got thumb rings. They both have forms of basket hilt. They both have cross guards that turn downwards towards the pommel at the front and upwards towards the blade at the back. So they have a lot of parallels, they have a lot in common, despite the fact that these are almost certainly for different types of soldier and with different blades on them. So we've got some other examples here on the wall behind me, aren't I lucky? So let's grab one of those. So if we detach this one here, this is an absolutely gorgeous example, and yet again we see the same features. We see a squat, mushroom-like pommel, okay? Round in that direction, squished in this direction, a short grip, a basket which in this case is not exactly symmetrical but is close to being symmetrical. It has a thumb ring, it has cross guard, which again towards the pommel at the front, towards the blade at the back, and it has a plate up here. It's a short grip, it's a confined hilt. This has a in fact, same as the other one, this has a backsword blade. It's single-edged for the first 40%, and for the remainder 60%, it's double-edged, okay? And this is a longer blade, so this is probably, not necessarily, but probably for cavalry use, but someone on foot could use it. I could quite happily use this. I should also mention that the combination of the basket, the squat mushroom-like pommel, and the thumb ring mean that this is held and used in certain ways, really quite similar, I would suspect, to a British backsword. You can't really align the point in line with the forearm very easily, because you've got the hand is engaged with the thumb ring and you've got quite a confined pommel in here. So for the most part, this is going to be used for cutting or for thrusting from angles, not for thrusting in a straight line as you would do with a rapier. So let's just carefully put that example down and grab another example here. So this is an interesting one because it has a few differences, but it has some common features as well. First of all, notice the squished squat pommel. It is square in this direction, quite a common type, but squashed in that direction. This doesn't have quillons that turn up and down. So this has more Saxon style quillons where they come out to this diamond shape with a little knob on the end, front and back. That's found on Saxon rapiers, for example. It doesn't have a completely symmetrical basket. It does actually protect more on the outside line, the back of the hand, than on the inside line. But it does have the thumb ring. It doesn't yet have the large plate at the front here. It actually has essentially side rings. So this to me is kind of like a missing link in the evolution, where originally the basket probably grew out of the side rings that we find already at the end of the 1400s on certain types of arming sword and indeed longsword. And they built the basket off that. An interesting feature of the construction of this one, incidentally, is that the knuckle bow comes down and actually sits in a little notch in the pommel, which I think is really nice. So this is a broadsword blade, this is double-edged, and an interesting detail is you might think, because we've got a finger ring there, and theoretically, because there's no plate, I have a hole, so I could put my finger over the guard to finger the guard. In reality, that blade is somewhat wide for the finger ring there, so it's actually and it's edged as well. There's no ricasso. So it's actually quite uncomfortable to do that, so I wouldn't recommend that. It could be that some of these originally were intended to have you finger the ricasso like that, but in this particular case, I find this quite uncomfortable to do that. And we do have the thumb ring in there as well. So personally, I would hold this one in that way with all of my fingers around the grip and the thumb through the thumb ring there. But very nice sword, probably I would say an earlier example. And you can probably see some parallels in the development here between British basket hilts and Venetian schiavona and these German basket hilts. And as I say, they can be found on a variety of blades, and some of the hilts that we find on Dussac and Tessac in this period are, if not the same, they clearly have related developmental features and are part of the overall German basket hilt tradition. Anyway, I hope that's been interesting to watch. If you've got any particular questions about these, then get posting in the comments down below. Linked down in the description, I'll also put the auction catalogue for the auction coming up on the 4th of December here at Olympia Auctions. And it's worth pointing out there are more examples of these in the auction. So if you look through the auction catalogue, you can find more variations of both these and also the Dussac. And you can see the variety of different basket hilts that we find within the German sphere in the 16th century. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and I hope I'll see you back on the channel soon. Cheers, folks.